morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first session of the Science Talks. We're very excited to share our passion for seaweed research with you. And we're going to have 12-minute talks, and we're going to have time for one or two questions right after each talk. I will be the first to present. I'm Lais. I worked for San Diego State University for the project Micro to Macro. And today we're going to be talking about what the seaweed microbiome is up to. So this project started in 2021 when I got together with my really good friends, Tori and Leslie from Sunken Seaweed. We're having a beer in my backyard, thinking of ways of getting funded and merge our expertises together. So we pitched a proposal idea to Dr. Matt Edwards at San Diego State, where we're merging seaweed farming with seaweed microbiome research to see if we can use microbes to boost productivity in seaweed farms. We applied for the NSF Convergence Accelerator grant, and that one, we applied for the Blue Economy track, and we're funded for 1 year in this project. The project Micro to Macro had the goal to grow the seaweed economy by developing a seaweed farming platform to support the grower from seed to sale. And we only advanced to phase 1, so that project was relatively short for scientific purposes, just 1 year. The objectives that we tackled in that year were to form a farmer network, and that was more Tori and Leslie's part of the project. And we also performed seaweed research, focusing on the seaweed microbiomes. So in land agriculture, we already learned how to harness the power of the microbiome to boost crop yields. The microbes can provide many different kinds of services to land plants. And we thought it would be a good idea to investigate that in also ocean farming, seaweed farming. And there's a lot of analogous functions that these microbes perform, both in ocean plants and land plants. First, they help them with reproductive success. So kelp babies, they really rely on really beneficial microbiomes to be able to thrive. And there's some species of seaweed that can only completely develop if they associate with specific bacterial taxa. So bacteria are essential to make seaweed grow and develop. Microbes are really good at helping all their hosts with nutrition, just like the microbes we have in our guts and that land plants have in their roots. Seaweeds have microbes on their blades that help them to acquire nutrients. And finally, they help the seaweeds with protection. They can help the seaweed to protect against pathogens, against things that are growing on their blades that they don't want it to grow, and also against abiotic stressors such as heat waves. So we're looking into seaweed beneficial microbiomes. Since seaweeds already naturally associate with beneficial microbes, why not harness this potential and use the specific taxa and functions for boosting seaweed productivity? This is a hot topic at the moment. There are many different research groups all over the world researching this. And the pipeline for the development of probiotics for seaweed starts with collecting a lot of samples, investigating what kind of microbes, microbial taxa and functions associate with seaweed, and finally isolating these microbes, coming up with an inoculum, and then testing in different systems. In phase 1, we sampled more than 150 microbiome samples across 7 different species of seaweeds from farms and natural beds in California, Oregon, and Alaska. We collected the seaweed tissue, and then we collected the microbes from the surface of the seaweed, and then trapped these microbes on a little filter. From that filter, we extracted the DNA of the bacteria and performed a metagenomic analysis, which is sequencing all the DNA of the whole community using bioinformatics to know what kind of taxa are there and what their functions they're performing, and then conducting statistical analysis on this data. Part of our data is already public on MGREST. So if you are a microbial expert and you want to use our data set, you can go to this website and then search for micro to macro. We expect to get 4 publications out of this project. Today, I'm only going to be talking about one small part of this big project. That is the microbiome of kelp farms in California. Kelp farming in California is going through a very, very exciting time. It's a brand new industry, and people are just starting to tackle this different avenue for food production, biofuel production, and our partners were Ocean Rainforest in Southern California, Santa Barbara, where we sampled the giant kelp microbiomes, and Green Wave up in Humboldt, where we sampled the bull kelp microbiomes. We started by sampling in Santa Barbara in the fall 2021. We sampled a farm and a natural bed. Up in Humboldt, we sampled bull kelp microbiomes, and also in farms and natural beds. And then we have a temporal data set in the spring and the summer for Humboldt. If you're not a microbial expert, all I want you to get from this slide is that there are about 565 different genera of bacteria associated with kelp in general. And these are the dominant ones that I have showing for you. And they perform a lot of different services for them. For example, Pseudomonas, it's a bacteria that helps seaweed to acquire nitrogen. Rosiobacter has been associated with their morphogenesis, so how they grow and develop. A lot of these taxa are associated with recycling the carbon in this ecosystem. Some of them are associated with production of antimicrobials for the seaweed, and some of them are associated with seaweeds that get a lot biofouling on their blades. Kelp farms promote a more homogeneous microbiome. This figure, all I want you to see is that each geometric figure represents a whole microbiome, and the closer they are, the more similar the communities are. So the bull kelp farm sampled in the summer had the most similar microbiome across the samples, followed by the giant kelp farm microbiomes in the fall. And finally, the kelp farms in the spring in Humboldt with 84.4%. So this is the similarity percentage, meaning the communities that we're sampling across these individuals, they overlap between 80% and 90%, which is a high overlap. The natural beds are more variable, both in Santa Barbara with giant kelp and in Humboldt with bull kelp. In the giant kelp microbiome, in the farms, we have an overrepresentation of Akkermansia, which is a taxa of bacteria that produces antimicrobes for the seaweeds, and also Rhodopyralula that helps kelp to cycle their carbon. In natural beds, we have Schwannella and Vibrio, more overrepresented, and these taxa have been associated with biofouling and also carbon cycling. In the bull kelp microbiome, in the spring, we have a taxa that has been associated with biofouling more represented, called Rickettsia. In the summer, we have different genera of flavobacteria associated with carbon cycling. So now we've been able to identify specific taxa and functions depending on what kind of season and what kind of location we're working on. So the takeaways is that the kelp farms homogenize their kelp microbiomes, which is expected. We're keeping the conditions very consistent. They have very similar microbiomes across the farm, which is good because if we want to use a probiotic approach in the future, we know it's going to be spread out very consistently in the farm, or at least we expect to. Microbiomes in the farms are comparable to natural beds, so it doesn't seem that the kelp farms are disrupting the microbiome in a bad way. And there are a lot of temporal changes, but we only had a year to sample these microbiomes, so we need further research for that part. The micro to macro project has come to an end, and we're able to develop a baseline, a database for seaweed microbiomes for the first time on the West Coast, and identify some potential beneficial taxa. So in that pipeline that I showed you earlier, we filled the gap for these first stages of identification of specific taxa and functions. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'll take 1 or 2 questions right now, just to keep the schedule going. Thank you. Yes, he asked if I saw any evidence of nitrogen fixation, which is when the bacteria get nitrogen that's not available for the seaweed and brings it into the system. We saw many nitrogen fixation genes. We have a different paper that's focusing on our nitrogen uptake, but we did see that, especially in Nova lactuca, sea lettuce. One more quick question if you have any. Yeah. She asked if there are any fungus or lichens in that ecosystem. There's definitely fungi, but it's a different kind of analysis that we need to do for fungi because they're not prokaryotic like the bacteria. They're sure there, but it didn't come up in our data set because of the way that we analyze the data. But lichen, I think, are only in, I believe they're only in land ecosystems, if I'm not mistaken. I'll look it up for you. Thank you so much. I'll present the next person giving the talk. Okay. So just like over here.
You check the time, please?
I'll check the time, okay. Yeah, and then I'll raise my hand when it's 10 minutes in, right. When you have 2 minutes more. Right. Our next presenter is Julio Palleiro. And he's going to be telling us about removing purple sea urchin for kelp forest protection.
Good morning. I work like a consultant with a group of fishermen, sea urchin fishermen in Baja California, and they are very concerned about the problem with the kelp forest dimension, and the reason we have a project that is supported, funding by the Secretaría of Fishermen in Baja California. And I would like to present the work. The reduction of the kelp beds is in California and Baja California very, very dramatic. From 2004, with the big heat waves that is spending too much time in our coast, and the kelp is dangerous. The other thing is the purple sea urchin. We can do it with the heat waves, but we can control the purple sea urchins to don't eat all the algae. And one of the problem is one of the predators, the sea stars, he have a reduction of the population, and also the other predators from sea urchin is lobsters and fish, and all are fishing very, very heavily. The collapse is also in the north of California and all the kelp forests, and we have too many problems with this purple sea urchins. The problem with the purple sea urchin is taken in Baja California is they eat the bottom of the plant that is attached to the rock, and in a few months it's possible to destroy the kelp forest. It's very dangerous, the sea urchin, because it's too many. The density is too many. Other type of algae is also eaten by this sea urchin, and lost all the plant, and in too many places you can see no algae over there because it's a scent. When they try to grow algae, the sea urchins eat everything. And the problem with the sea urchin is the landings in Baja California for the red sea urchin and the purple sea urchin. The problem is the fishery is they have a very a good gonads, and the gonads in the sea urchin are grow by the food they can get, and the purple sea urchin is very poor gonads because it's high densities. Entonces it's not to control for the fishermen. We select a place 30 miles from Ensenada to get the experiment. It's called Las Gaviotas. There are a few plants of kelp or macrocystis, but too many sea urchins. In the first, well, we have a control side and remote side. We have to take care of how many purple sea urchin can do it, and we also check the density of the sea urchin, the juvenile macrocystis and adult. And the results are here. In May, without taking anything, we ate 18 sea urchins per square meter. But we have 26 pounds of seed take it from that place, and the reduction of the density was very good. And it's 2020. I'm sorry, it's 2020, and this year they grow a 4 sea urchin by square meter. With the juvenile, we have better densities in the removal zone, but not for the adult plant. More or less the same, but here we have a very good juvenile of macrocystis in this year. The conclusion of the talk is that we can control the sea urchin. It's possible to control the sea urchin. The papers say that it's two sea urchin by square meter, but in each place is very different because the kelp beds are very different. And in this place, we have 4 purple sea urchin and don't eat the plant. They eat from attached fronts from the bottom, and it's possible to grow gonads. To the fishermen that we are working, it's possible to sell that kind. Well, the thing is, we can control the density of the sea urchin. It's possible to do it. In California, they do it in many places, and the recovery of the kelp beds is very good. I think it's all I can say. I'm sorry for my English, but someone have a point?
I was wondering if there's a river or any freshwater input at your study site?
No, it's not. It's not close to the river. Do you have another one? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Muy rápido.
No hay problema.
Oh, do you have a business card?
All right. Our next presenter is Ann Bishop. Ann is a hatchery lead at Ocean Rainforest, and she will be telling us about envisioning offshore kelp aquaculture in Southern California.
Is there a slide? Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Ann, and I'm the hatchery lead. What that means is that I grow lots and lots of baby kelp. I'm going to tell you today a little bit about Ocean Rainforest and some of the work we're doing to advance kelp aquaculture in California. So this might be a little bit of a different talk than maybe you thought you'd hear today at a seaweed festival, but aquaculture is super exciting and a super important way that we as humans can work with nature rather than against nature. Across the globe, and in particular this diagram from Council of European Academics is showing how aquaculture assists with how we can live more sustainably, from supporting ecosystems, CO2 restoration, to growing biomass that can both feed us and also support new technologies that are reducing our carbon footprint. Who is Ocean Rainforest? We are a kelp farming company. We have our parent company based in the Faroe Islands, and California Ocean Rainforest is located in Santa Barbara. And we, between all of us, have over 15 years of offshore seaweed cultivation and kelp growing experience. And we are currently operating the first of its kind 86-acre offshore kelp cultivation and growing facility in the US, which is incredibly exciting. And we're able to do this through a wonderful 7-year contract for the Department of Energy ARPA-E Mariner program, which is a program that looks for innovative ways to advance energy security and development in the US. And we secured our first federal waters permit ever to grow seaweed offshore, which is very exciting. And the last time that we were able to attend the Seaweed Festival was in 2021, and we had just started, so we were able to give a window into the hatchery management, and we were at the time applying for the permit to do this demonstration farm, which we received early in spring of 2023. And we were able to install our demonstration farm with going through all the proper channels and creating a monitoring plan with our partners across federal permitting agencies. We were then able, after installing our farm, able to use a mix of direct and twine seeding methods to put our kelp out onto the farm. And this past summer, we've been monitoring and growing our biomass for this upcoming 2024 kelp season. And I'll give you a little bit more as to what that means in a moment. And so last time we were able to present to the California Seaweed Fest, or up until this point, we could just show a cartoon or a schematic of our proposed farm. And so this is what the schematic looked like. As you can see, we use lines, which is a traditional seaweed farming technique, but also it makes it really great for offshore farming because it allows the flexibility to move with the waves, the currents, and the storms that we sometimes get in California. And the exciting thing is we were able to install this farm earlier this year. And here it is, the very first U.S. Pacific Coast offshore aquaculture seaweed farm. One thing to note, you might be like, gosh, that doesn't look like that drawing at all. The buoys, these little bright yellow spots, those are all buoys that show the boundaries of our farm. And then if you squint really hard, you might be able to see some little orange dots. Those are helping to keep our cultivation lines at the proper depth for our kelp to grow, so they get plenty of sunlight. And we hope, when El Nino lets up, also as much nutrients as they can want. And so that is our first farm. And the buoys are wonderful. They help with navigation and keeping our farm noticeable and also keeping it in one place. And not only that, but we have kelp growing on it. We didn't just get the farm in the water. We were able to seed the kelp. And these are some pictures from this past August and September as we've been going out and monitoring the farm. So we put out 2 different types of seeding, direct seeding and also twine seeding. And you can see that despite our El Nino system, which has If you think about on a regular farm, you fertilize your farm so you get big crops. El Nino is like you take all the nutrients out of the water, out of the soil. And so our kelp's been growing this year in spite of those conditions, which is super exciting. And we're going to be continuing to grow kelp and update how well our kelp is growing as time continues. But it's exciting. It's a good proof of concept and bodes really well for our 2024 season. And you might be wondering, okay, great, but how do you actually go about growing kelp? How do you know it's going to grow? Well, we base our seaweed farming philosophy off of the life history of the kelp itself. So you'll probably hear a lot of life history stories about kelp here at the Seaweed Festival. Just as a quick refresher, the kelp that we see on the beach and on the waters is this big, beautiful adult sporophyte, and at the bottom is where it makes the reproductive blades, or the seeds, if you will. It releases those spores that then become a male or a female gametophyte, or a microscopic individual, which then will produce either an egg or a sperm. They will meet up, and they have to be very close together, just about 1 millimeter away, or the whole thing doesn't happen. And then they create a new sporophyte. So it's a little bit more complicated than traditional plants, but it makes it an exciting species to cultivate, because we can use that system to grow the kelp in the lab. And so all of this seaweed cultivation cycle starts with collecting those spores. And so what we'll do is we'll have our seed stock, which are those reproductive blades, which you can see here in the tray at the side and over here, where they are then able to sporulate in the lab, and we get those spores and are able to grow them. And what's really fun about kelp and other seaweeds is that you can manipulate the light and the nutrients to control the growth rate. And so by growing the gametophytes under red light, it tricks them into thinking, oh, it's just time to grow. It's not time to reproduce. And so they will just grow vegetatively and get bigger. We can break them apart just like you would break your succulents apart if you want to make more succulents on your patio. And we can increase our biomass that way, which is very exciting. And so we can, and as they grow, we get more and more until we have enough to seed our farm, or a little extra just in case something happens to one of our cultures. The next step is induction followed by seeding. And induction is what we call that process of allowing those microscopic kelps to go reproductive and produce that egg and sperm to then make the new sporophyte. And so we'll take them out of the red light, put them in white light, which triggers them to go, aha, it is time. It is my time. I will now make more kelp. And so they will then meet up, and then you get the cutest little sporophytes. So that is the tiniest of baby kelp that will then grow into an adult kelp. It's maybe like 0.5 millimeter long, if that. Super cute. And then they can go out into the water, and then we just let nature take its course. And so about a month or so after we put out the kelp, we get these tiny little blades. You can see on the rope, it's probably about as long as your pinky. Really sweet, really adorable. Hasn't split yet to any of those classical, beautiful fronds. And then about a month or two after that, you'll then have 2 blades. And once they have 2 blades, they just start taking off and get bigger and bigger and make these gorgeous fronds until eventually, oops, oh, I can go backwards. I didn't know I could go backwards. There we go. Until eventually they reach the surface. And once they reach the surface, the canopy can continue to grow, and that means it's time to harvest. And kelp is really special in that, like grass, it will continue to grow as long as you maintain that growth point at the bottom. And so our vision is that we can get the spacing and the science of how to grow kelp down to where you can basically use a boat lawnmower, like some of the kelp cutters that used to be able to use here in San Diego, to then go between the rows of cultivation to then cut the kelp to supply a regular source of biomass for whatever new and interesting things that we can invent seaweed to do. And so the wonderful thing about kelp, and especially macrocystis, is it reproduces all year long. And so you can time your seeding and your system to then reflect what weather conditions with oceanic conditions you're experiencing, which is really an advantage as climate change is shifting a lot of our preconceived notions of when the coldest time is, when the most nutrient-rich time is. It makes for a really exciting system. And so some of our future goals at Ocean Rainforest, as I said, we're preparing for our 2024 seeding crop. We're hoping to seed in December if the weather is kind. And this is actually a picture of some of those gametophytes that will be going into induction and making baby kelp that will then go out on the farm. We're also working on connecting with markets and customers to try and find the best and most useful way to connect our biomass to the rest of the world. And we're also focusing on ways to build on some of the knowledge that's being developed in other seaweed species. Our parent company in the Faroe Islands farms alaria, or sugar kelp, in the Atlantic, which is the primary farming species for the Atlantic. And so we're taking what they've learned and seeing how we can adapt it to make for a better system here in the Pacific with growing macrocystis. And then, of course, while doing all this, we are making sure that we are fulfilling our regulatory compliance and monitoring within and around our farm to make sure that we are not doing any harm in the process of getting this farm going, because we would love to see kelp farming come to the Pacific as a much more widespread industry. So thank you. All right, and I'll take any questions.
So it's like, obviously we have a rich environment for kelp farming. Where else can we kelp farm?
So that's a great question. The question is, where else can we kelp farm? And NOAA just released this amazing document they put a lot of work into, where they have identified places for potential aquaculture offshore and nearshore across California in this huge document. They brought in GIS from archaeological and cultural resources, fisheries, other natural resources like marine mammal surveys, to identify key places that are the most useful and most available, utilized for aquaculture development. And if you just look for NOAA aquaculture report in our magic computer boxes that live in our pockets, you can go through and read all about it. And it's not just limited to kelp. They're also looking for people who are interested in things like mussels or shellfish as well.
Can I ask one more question? So where they're doing farming, let's say salmon, etc., isn't a kelp farm like almost like a fit for that kind of aquaculture?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that too much, but I imagine as all of the technologies with aquaculture and as we learn more about how to do ecosystem-based adaptive aquaculture farming, that would be a really interesting and potentially great prospect of finding a way to do multi-trophic aquaculture offshore. Yes?
I worked with the Fish and Game a long time ago when Coco Kelp Company was like mowing the beds, and I wanted to know what happened after that. Like, when did they stop mowing the beds? Because we were trying to control the sea urchin population back then, with cameras.
I am a little bit familiar with Kelpco, the Kelpco cutters. I don't know exactly when it fell off, but my understanding is why it fell off is that it just wasn't profitable anymore. And if someone knows better than I do, please correct me. I can definitely make mistakes and not know all my dates and history of Kelpco, I'm afraid.
Late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Is when they closed down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of cystis, typically needs rocky substrate. It looked like you guys are deeper water than that. So is that what the canopy with the ropes to find something for the best?
Yes, so traditional wild kelp does require some type of hard rocky substrate. Because of the line we're using and the proportion and how we're doing the density, we're able to convince the kelp that the rope is good enough for it to grab onto. I don't know, I'm sure I can't be the only one who at some point when walking along the beach you find a little macrocystis that's grabbed a rock or a seashell, and it just gets washed up by the tide. So they don't, unless they get washed out of the water, they don't notice. And our lines are not on the bottom of the ocean. They're at a depth where they still can receive plenty of light. So, yeah. Any, oh.
Any issues with, do you have any worries about the genetic strains that you're raising, introducing with any of the wild strains?
That's a great question. So the question was if we have any worries about the genetic strains of our kelp mixing with wild kelp. And the way we're being mindful of that is that we are using only local strains. Our kelp that we use for sporulation is Santa Barbara kelp. And so if a piece of our kelp was able to escape and go reproductive, it would not have any markers that are not already in the population, because we try to be mindful of local adaptation and local autonomy with the genetics. We do not. The question was if there's a regulation that we have to follow where we must outplant our kelp a certain distance from the mother plant. We do not currently have that, and I think in part it's because our farm is offshore so far. So we are 4 nautical miles, 5 actual miles from the harbor and from the coastline, and so we're pretty far from our any of our mother plants. Yeah. But great question.
Does that make it like a federal land where you can harvest?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So when you said 5 nautical miles, or I'm not familiar with like what that distance is. So that makes it so you can harvest outside of, like inside of federal land.
Is that international waters, federal land?
Our farm's located in Federal, and we have no intentions, and we do not collect kelp in state waters. We are only going to be harvesting the kelp that we grow on our farm.
By the way, I celebrate.
Okay.
I'm not trying to argue.
No, I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding and answering your question appropriately. Okay, one more.
So for the harvest, with the array that you have offshore, are you doing what Kelco did, where you just take the top portion, or are you harvesting the entire array?
So the vision is to one day have a kelp cutter on a boat, probably much smaller than Kelpco because of our scale. For right now, what we're doing is we hand raise the lines and clean them. So that's part of the processing that we are still developing. But that would be the vision, is that one day you seed the farm once every 2 to 3 years, and you just have the kelp growing, and you can harvest as is appropriate for how it grows. That would be the vision.
So follow up, do you just hand raise, or like you grab it with a crane to bring up? Because that's a lot of.
Well, there's machines, right?
Yeah, we have a device on our boat that helps us lift the line so we can clean the line. But yeah, I think we have time. But I'll be around the festival today, so I'm happy to continue to talk and answer questions.
Thank you, Anne. Our next presenter is Michael Marty-Rivera. Michael is a culture curator at AltaSeads Conservancy, and he will be telling us about AltaSeads Conservancy for seaweed seed banking.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Green only? Okay, thank you. All right, so yeah, name is Michael Marty-Rivera, curator for this newly formed nonprofit AltaSeads Conservancy, and essentially gonna be talking about what we are and what we're doing, and this word seed banking. So first off, wanna be talking about what are. Oh, I don't know that. Okay, so wanted to start off by talking about the kelp populations in California. So this is coming from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, essentially talking about the current status of kelp forests. So following these essentially warm waters that happened in 2014, 2016, we can say that there were patchy declines in the south, then there were also declines in central California, and then extreme declines in northern California. And this essentially due to what is known as El Nino, Southern Oscillation. And that was like a big event that, you know, warms up the waters and they just cannot handle it. But other than these event of climate event, there were also other issues that happened during these years. I think Julio mentioned earlier there was like the sea stars that died off, and then the urchin populations exploded, and all these factors contribute to kelp losses. So why should you care? So kelps are very important ecologically. They help biodiversity. They're an essential habitat for commercial and ecologically important species. So essentially, these serve as feeding grounds, breeding grounds, and nursing grounds for like fish, invertebrates, and many other things. They also provide ecosystem services, such as absorbing nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. And this is important because, you know, excess of nutrients will cause things like, you know, microalgal blooms and, you know, affect water quality. And then also they're oxygen producer, carbon dioxide remover. They can help with deacidification by this way. So other than that, they're also very important for aquaculture farming, as you've just heard. So yeah, kelps are a reliable food source. They're nutritionally rich. They're high in protein, vitamins, iodine, and they're also creating jobs for coastal communities in aquaculture. They can create new products to support growing human populations, which, you know, it's important. The other good thing is that they're a sustainable crop in that they do not require fertilizer or any fresh water for growth. Both of those things, well, just a fertilizer already is gonna like add nutrients into the waters, which is, you know, cause the problem that I said earlier. And then fresh water, you know, it's such an important resource to have, and if we can have a crop that doesn't require that, I think that's just wonderful. And it also does not compete for land use, which, you know, as we keep growing and expanding, the land use is gonna be more competitive. So now shifting to AltaSeads Conservancy and what we are. So essentially, we aim to develop and maintain kelp gametophytes, and you all know about kelp gametophytes because you just heard about them. So we want to first off start by getting these gametophytes from essentially the west coast of the U.S. And hoping to expand in the future. And the reason is to keep these in a seed bank for restoration and mariculture or aquaculture. I did not mean to do that. And just as a quick thing, this list here, I'm not gonna go over it, but you know, this is some of the species we currently have holding. So, you know, overall we have around over 1,000 individuals, you know, ranging from all of those, but that's kind of the idea. The biggest one we have right now is the giant kelp. We have most of our collection is in that species. So now it doesn't want to go. This is just for show. This is some images I took from algae base and, you know, reference down there. Essentially, just for show, no other reason, just so you can see what some of these look like. So that's feather boa over there, bull kelp, alaria, sea palm, and you know, I'm just gonna move on. This is just a quick map showing what are the range of some of the collections that we have currently. We do have more, but this is just old map that I have, and I just wanted to get this here. So we have a lot of bull kelp from along California, and then from giant kelp, they're just down here in the southern part. So AltaSeads Conservancy has three main components, and I'm gonna break them down as aquaculture, seed banking, and then breeding tools. So first off, we have land-based aquaculture system. We have 10 500 gallons and then 14 like 210 gallon tanks. We have two water tables in the back there, not really see them, but and then we have a large reservoir for seawater. And this is all like a closed water circulation system, which is going to be available for like biomass growth, research collaborators, aquaculture education, and then commercial partners or renting. So that's the first part. Then we have the seed banking. So essentially, the seed bank, it's gonna hold and ensure that certain species of, like, would think seeds to keep them safe in storage. And we ensure that these seeds are viable to replant to get new material. So over there on that side, we have some seeds, and that's what a land-based seed bank could look like. You have like all these jars tightly sealed with the different IDs of different grains in this case. And then this here is an image of what one of our culture racks with our gametophyte collection looks like. So we keep them in these really small vials. These are like 4 ml milliliters. And so we keep them individually isolated, males and females. So this would be like a image of a male gametophyte, and then here's a female gametophyte. And again, you've heard this earlier, but it's the red light to keep them to go only vegetative growth, not reproductive. We keep them low temperature, low light, and we can keep, what is it, like over 12,000 currently in our current conditions, individuals. And they don't take much space at all. So that's that. And then the last component for AltaSeads would be crossing and breeding. So breeding for sustainability and resiliency, you can know parentage and populations. And just so you know, right, like land crops have had breeding for centuries. And plants, choosing plants that have desirable traits, like just more of the yummy parts of the fruit. And so for seaweeds, we are thinking of traits that we can breed, such as thermal tolerance, faster growth, anti-herbivory compounds, and also commercially important biologically active compounds. And just crossing at the gametophyte stage, we're hoping we can get to that point. So one other thing at AltaSeads is we have project diversity, where we have our location is at AltaSea at the Port of Los Angeles, and we have this network of different industry, research, or other nonprofit organizations that we're always in communication, sort of to have collaborations. Yeah. So. Other than that, I think a really important part for me is also everything that is outreach and education. Since I've been here, which is like 6 months by now, we've engaged with students from many schools around Los Angeles, where we discuss things like the importance of kelps and the kelp forests, like what are the challenges in climate or like anthropogenic effects, and how and just how aquaculture can be, something that can be done in the future. And then that's me over there with the arrow. And I think we've engaged probably over 300 students since I've been here, so it's pretty good. So another cool thing that happened recently was that we got a donation of aquarium equipment by this company, Aperture Pet and Life, where they donated these really nice lights and the brackets and everything to use on our aquaculture system that I mentioned. And this is ideal for growing our kelp and, continue to grow into collaborations and a restoration in general. So ongoing efforts that we're going through right now. Essentially, we're increasing our collection. We're working now with Alaska colleagues to seed bank kelps from up there. Like I said, we started with just California, but we're hoping to like keep increasing. And other than that, we're also receiving reproductive tissues from just around here within state in California to get more into our collection. And that's essentially the presentation. Thank you. Both. Both. We have essentially the seeds, the gametophytes, and we would have them available for either aquaculture or restoration purposes, depending on what the people would need. Yeah. The who? Yeah, yeah. Well, we do have it in the collection, yes. How it could be used here is like a more tricky question, right? Because yeah, it is not a native. It's not ideal in that sense, but we have it. If someone figures a way to like use it in that sense, then you know it would be available for anyone. Yes. 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 Exactly. Yeah.
Playing on that, once you introduce a non-native species,
Mhm.
doesn't that affect native species?
Yes. If you put like any non-native species into an ecosystem that didn't have it before, you run into the potential problem that there might be like no predators for said species, right? So that could be problematic and it could overtake the area. So yes, ideally not a good idea to put like non-natives. Yes, no. Um, so how to prevent senescence? Not really have experience with that. We've had many gametophytes for over decades, and they seem fine in terms of pigmentation and just looking under the microscope. They look fine. I believe people have done experiments with again like really old gametophyte cultures, and they still go reproductive, and you still get sporophyte production. Yeah. Someone else? Yeah. So how long can they be viable for? So again, going back to like 1980s, we got some gametophytes from the 1980s, and we have them, and I think they should still work fine. So they have longevity, and like I just said, like people have done experiments using these, and they have still like gone reproductive. So yeah, I would not know.
So, isn't California in particular very good with seaweed production? I mean, aren't we the front runners as far as how much viable resource we have?
Viable resource in what sense?
Meaning harvestable and using for population consumption.
I I don't know. I think that's more of like an opinion, right? Because you could have much production in other places. Like I know Maine is like really good on like farming. Are you talking farming in general? Yeah. So for farming, like Maine is like really big right now in the U.S., right? And then Alaska is another like big one. California, well, again, yeah. So Anne was saying earlier, like they're really trying to get this farm up and running, and definitely should be possible. Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't, but it's all the permitting. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
California is highly regulated, more than many of the states. So that's the major reason why seaweed farming doesn't take off more here. But we do have great resources and many commercial species that are native. But Anne knows the the headaches that are involved in permitting. Now I think they don't do new leases for that kind of industry anymore. So they're not really boosting natural harvesting. I think that the old leases are still running in some places, but they don't incentivize that anymore. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you so much. On a Saturday morning, you came to be nerdy about seaweed with us. I do encourage you to stay for the next panel. My opinion is going to be the coolest of the festival. It's the Indigenous Peoples Forum. So we want to give them 4 minutes to set up and get organized, but please stay for this panel. It's going to be really good. Thank you so much for coming.